Imagine you are tired after a long trip. You've been walking around, maybe carrying luggage, maybe just carrying the heavy weight of existing in this very strange universe. And you see a hotel, a big hotel. It looks normal at first. Neon sign, maybe a little outdated carpet in the lobby. That classic smell of too much coffee and not enough cleaning. You know, the standard hotel vibe. But then you notice something odd. The sign says, "Welcome to Hilbert's Hotel. Infinite rooms, always available. Never full." Now, I don't know about you, but if I see a hotel advertising infinite rooms, I'm either checking in immediately or running away very fast. Because infinite is not usually a word you want connected to your travel plans. Like, imagine the breakfast buffet. It never ends. The line stretches beyond the horizon. You go for scrambled eggs and you come back 2 centuries later. But Hilbert's Hotel is not a normal place. It is a thought experiment, a wild mental playground created by one of the greatest mathematicians in history, David Hilbert. And tonight, or this morning, depending on when you are listening, I am going to tell you the story of this impossible hotel, a hotel that cannot exist in reality, but lives in the imagination of anyone curious about infinity. So settle in, get comfortable, and maybe tuck yourself under a blanket, because the Infinite Hotel is about to open its doors, and the concierge is a man with some very strange ideas. Now let's start with the basics. Who was Hilbert? Picture a German mathematician in the late 1800s and early 1900s, calm, sharp, and with a little twinkle in his eye that said, "I am about to break your brain with a math problem." Hilbert loved making abstract ideas feel almost playful. Where most people saw numbers as dull and rigid, he saw them as characters in a comedy sketch, and his Infinite Hotel is exactly that, a comedy sketch about infinity. The idea goes like this. Imagine a hotel that has infinitely many rooms, not 100 rooms, not 1,000 rooms, not even 1 billion, infinite, which means the rooms go on forever. You could walk down the corridor for your entire life and never see the end. You could rollerblade, skateboard, Segway. It doesn't matter. The hallway does not stop. The room numbers keep increasing forever. Room 1, Room 2, Room 3, 4, 5, 6, and on and on. If you think you've reached the end, surprise, you haven't. The rooms stretch out like the universe itself. Now here comes the fun part. Let's say every single room is already taken. The hotel is completely full. Normally that would mean you're out of luck. No more space. Time to go sleep in your car, or under a bridge, or in the world's saddest Airbnb. But in Hilbert's Hotel, there is always room for one more. Always. How? Well, Hilbert's genius trick was to simply move each guest to the next room. The person in room 1 moves to room 2. The person in room 2 moves to room 3. Room 3 moves to room 4. And so on forever. Suddenly, room 1 is empty, and you, the tired traveller, can check in. At first, this feels like a little math magic trick, but the more you think about it, the stranger it becomes. A hotel that is full, and yet can still take more guests. A place where logic feels slippery. And this is the whole point. Infinity does not behave like normal numbers. Infinity is weird. And the more you play with this thought experiment, the weirder it gets. Because if you can fit one extra guest, you can also fit a bus full of guests. You can even fit an infinite bus with infinite passengers. And then you start thinking about trains and airplanes and armies of people all checking in at once. And somehow the hotel never says no. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. For now, I just want you to imagine that strange lobby. The reception desk is manned by David Hilbert himself. He has a polite smile, maybe a bow tie, and infinite patience. After all, you would need infinite patience to manage infinite guests. The check-in process alone would last until the end of time. But he doesn't mind. He seems amused by it all. And if you look around, you notice the hotel staff are also infinite. There are infinite bellhops carrying infinite suitcases up infinite staircases. There are infinite cleaning staff changing infinite bed sheets in infinite rooms. I imagine somewhere there is an infinite complaint box already stuffed with notes from guests who are upset because the minibar only had infinitely tiny bottles of water. This hotel is impossible. It could never exist. But as a thought experiment, it is brilliant. It shows us just how slippery the concept of infinity really is. Now, infinity is one of those words we hear all the time but rarely stop to think about. Kids say it on the playground. I love you to infinity. Or the classic, infinity plus one. In superhero movies, it's infinity stones. In video games, it's infinite ammo mode. But mathematically, infinity is not just a really big number. It is something completely different. Something that doesn't play by the normal rules. Hilbert's hotel is like a mirror that reflects this weirdness back at us. When we imagine checking into this hotel, our brain struggles because part of us wants to treat infinity like it's just a really big number, like 1 trillion times a trillion. But infinity isn't that. Infinity is more like an idea, a direction, something you can move towards but never reach. And here is where the story gets fun. Because Hilbert didn't design this thought experiment just to confuse people. He wanted to make infinity feel real. He wanted you to picture it, laugh at it, argue with it. He wanted you to see how math can bend reality in ways that make your head spin. Think of it this way. Most hotels try to impress you with a pool, or a breakfast buffet, or maybe free Wi-Fi. Hilbert's hotel, it impresses you by breaking the laws of logic. It gives you a paradox with your pillow, and somehow that's way more entertaining than a swimming pool. So as we begin this journey through the infinite hotel, I want you to keep something in mind. This is not a lecture. This is not school. This is more like story time, with a little bit of math dressed up in a silly costume. We are going to wander through this hotel together, peek into the rooms, listen to the strange conversations of the guests, and maybe even get lost in the corridors. And while you might laugh at the absurdity, you will also learn something very real about mathematics, about infinity, and maybe even about the universe itself. By the time we're done, you might feel a little dizzy, but hopefully also a little amazed, and maybe, if I've done my job right, a little sleepy too. Because there is something calming about infinity. It stretches out so far that your problems start to look tiny in comparison. If the universe can handle infinity, maybe it can handle whatever's on your to-do list tomorrow. So welcome, traveller. Your room is ready. Don't worry, there's always space here. Hilbert is waiting with your key. Just be careful not to get lost in the hallways. They go on forever. So, you walk up to the reception desk at Hilbert's hotel. The floor is shiny, but also kind of sticky. The kind of floor that looks clean from far away. But if you drop a gummy bear on it, you are not picking that thing back up. Behind the counter, the hotel manager looks up. He's smiling. His name tag says Hilbert. Welcome, he says. We are completely full tonight. Every single room is occupied. But don't sit. Worry. We still have space for you. Now wait a second. Completely full and still space? That's like me telling you I ate the entire pizza. But also there are still slices left if you want some. It makes no sense. Your brain wants to protest, but here at the Infinite Hotel, sense is optional. Let's slow down and unpack the paradox. In a normal hotel, the rules are simple. If there are 100 rooms, and all 100 rooms are full, you can't squeeze in more people. Unless you share a bed, and let's be real, that's awkward, especially when the stranger next to you snores like a lawnmower. But in Hilbert's hotel, there are infinite rooms. So when Hilbert says we're full, that doesn't mean what you think it means. Here's the trick. Hilbert asks every guest to move. The person in room 1 goes to room 2. The person in room 2 goes to room 3. Room 3 moves to room 4. and so on, forever. Just like in chapter 1. But this time, imagine you're the one standing in the lobby. You watch a wave of guests marching down the hallway, one step to the right, room to room, door to door, endlessly, like a very slow, very confused conga line. And suddenly, room 1 is empty. The paradox is solved. You have a place to sleep. This is the moment where most people feel their brains start to wobble because the rules we've used our whole lives no longer apply. Normally, full means full, end of story. But here, full means kind of full, but not really. Infinity doesn't behave like regular numbers, and the infinite hotel is designed to make you feel that strangeness. Okay, but let's take it one step further. What if 2 new guests show up at the same time? No problem, says Hilbert. Everyone moves 2 rooms over instead of 1. The person in room 1 goes to room 3. Room 2 goes to room 4. Room 3 goes to room 5. You get the idea. Now rooms 1 and 2 are empty. 2 new guests, 2 new beds. Problem solved. What if a whole bus arrives? Let's say 50 people at once. The bus smells faintly of nachos and bad decisions. 50 tourists pile into the lobby. In a normal hotel, chaos. But here, easy. Everyone shifts 50 rooms down. Room 1 goes to room 51. Room 2 goes to 52. Room 3 to 53, and so on forever. Now the first 50 rooms are free. Each tourist gets a room. Infinity yawns and says, "Is that all you've got?" This is where it gets fun. You can add as many people as you want and the hotel never truly runs out of space. 1 bus, 10 buses, 1,000,000 buses. Everyone can be accommodated with a little rearrangement. And if you're sitting there thinking, okay, but eventually we'll hit a limit, the whole point is that there is no limit. Infinity keeps stretching. It doesn't flinch. Now let's pause and think about what this really means. When you hear the word infinity, you might imagine something unimaginably huge, like stars in the sky, or grains of sand on the beach. But the Infinite Hotel shows us something deeper. Infinity is not just a very large number. It's a whole different category of thing. It's a world where the usual rules of counting don't apply. Let's put it this way. Imagine you own a box of cookies. If you eat 1 cookie, the number of cookies goes down. Simple. But in Hilbert's hotel, if you remove a guest, the hotel still has the same number of guests. Infinity. If you add a guest, same thing. Infinity. If you add 1,000,000,000 guests, still infinity. You cannot make infinity larger or smaller by adding or subtracting any finite number. That's the paradox. That's the madness. And Hilbert loved this madness. He wanted people to see how infinity breaks our intuition. Because if math is just rules written on paper, that's boring. But if math can make your brain explode, that's fun. Now here's where the humor comes in. Imagine being a guest at this hotel. You've just unpacked your suitcase in room 207, and suddenly you hear a knock. "Excuse me," says the bellhop. "We're moving you to room 257 now. A bus just arrived." You grumble, repack, move down the hall. 10 minutes later, another knock. "Sorry, we need your room for an airplane full of people." You drag your suitcase again. At this point, you're wondering why you didn't just sleep in your car. I like to imagine the hotel reviews. 3 stars. The bed was comfortable, but I had to change rooms 14 times during the night. 1 star. The hallway literally never ended. I walked for 6 hours looking for the elevator. 5 stars. Would stay again if time and space still exist. The Infinite Hotel is both hilarious and disturbing. It's a comedy sketch that never ends, but it's also a mirror that shows us how strange infinity really is. And here's the secret. This is not just a silly thought experiment. It connects to deep questions in mathematics. For example, if infinity is so weird, can there be different sizes of infinity? Can some infinities be bigger than others? Spoiler, yes they can. And that little fact nearly drove mathematicians insane. But that's a story for later. For now, let's stay in the lobby. You are standing there, holding your room key, staring down the longest corridor you've ever seen. Room numbers stretch out endlessly, disappearing into the horizon. You can almost hear the echoes of footsteps, shuffling from room to room as new guests keep arriving. And even though the hotel is full, somehow, there will always be a place for you. That's the paradox. That's Hilbert's Hotel, and checking in is only the beginning. So, you've checked in at Hilbert's Hotel. You've been given your key, maybe a slightly bent key card with the numbers worn off. You drag your suitcase down the endless hallway, past carpets that look like they were chosen by someone who hated colour but loved headaches. You finally reach your room. You open the door, and inside, a bed, a lamp, maybe a painting of a fruit bowl that looks like it's judging you, just like any hotel room. But don't get too comfortable, because something weird is about to happen. The phone rings. It sits Hilbert at the front desk. "Hello, dear guest," he says politely. "I'm afraid an infinite bus has just pulled up outside. We still need to move everyone around again." An infinite bus. Imagine that for a moment. Not just a really long bus. Not just a convoy of buses. A single bus with infinite passengers. How would that even work? The bus stretches forever. The passengers keep walking off. You're standing in the lobby watching this endless line of people march in, and after 10 minutes you realize they're not stopping. After an hour, still not stopping. After a year, yep, still unloading. Now here's the question. The hotel was already full. Every room had a guest. But somehow, Hilbert insists there's still room for all these infinite passengers. How? This is where infinity meets logic. And logic throws up its hands and says, "I quit." Here's Hilbert's plan. Every guest already staying in the hotel moves to a new room. But this time, instead of moving just one room down, they move to the room that's double their current number. Room 1 moves to room 2. Room 2 moves to room 4. Room 3 goes to room 6. Room 4 goes to room 8. And so on forever. Do you see what happened? Now every even-numbered room is full. Room 2, 4, 6, 8. All the way down the hallway. But that means every odd-numbered room is empty. And there are infinitely many odd numbers. Which means infinitely many rooms are now available. Problem solved. When you first hear this, your brain probably starts making that Windows error sound. Because wait, how can the hotel already be full, and then fit infinite more guests, and then somehow still have infinite empty rooms left over? It feels like math is cheating. But that's the whole point. Infinity doesn't play by the rules of regular numbers. Let's compare. In the normal world, if you have 10 rooms and they're all full, you can't add more people. You're done. But in the infinite hotel, you can always shuffle people around and create more space. Infinity has a kind of elasticity. It stretches to fit whatever situation you throw at it. And the strangest part, the hotel doesn't just fit one infinite bus. It can fit 2 infinite buses, or 10, or an infinite number of infinite buses, and the math still works. It's absurd, it's hilarious, and it's absolutely true. Here's another way to picture it. Imagine you're at a grocery store checkout. The line is infinite. People standing there forever, each with their carts full of frozen pizzas and questionable amounts of cat food. Normally, if you joined the back of the line, you'd be doomed. You'd never get to the cashier. But in Hilbert's world, the cashier shouts, "Everyone move to a new line that's twice your number." Suddenly, every odd-numbered position in the line is free. Infinite new spaces. Now infinite more shoppers can join. And somehow, it still makes sense. This is the flavor of Hilbert's Hotel. It takes infinity, which seems abstract and unreachable, and makes it feel real and funny. It's like a cartoon, but the math is dead serious. Now, let me share something interesting. Not everyone loved this idea. When Hilbert introduced the hotel, some mathematicians and philosophers thought it was silly. They argued that infinity should not be treated like a real thing. They thought it was dangerous. Like trying to pet a tiger and pretending it's a kitten, infinity bites back. And yet, this silly hotel actually reveals something profound. It shows that not all infinities are the same. The infinity of natural numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on can be rearranged, shuffled, manipulated in ways that seem impossible. But there are even larger infinities out there. We'll get to that later when George Cantor crashes this story like a dramatic guest who demands room service at 3 in the morning. For now, let's stick with the hotel and the bus. Picture the chaos of moving day. Guests dragging luggage, sighing, muttering under their breath. I just unpacked, and now I have to move again. Bellhops running around, juggling infinite suitcases. The front desk calmly smiling as if this is all totally normal. And outside, the infinite bus driver leaning on the horn, impatiently waiting for all his passengers to get settled. It's funny to think about, but also slightly unsettling, because it forces us to question how much we actually understand numbers. We think we get it. 1 plus 1 is 2, 10 plus 10 is 20. Easy, but infinity plus infinity? That's where things get weird. In fact, one of the wildest lessons of Hilbert's hotel is that infinity plus infinity is still just infinity. Infinity times 2, still infinity. Infinity times 10, still infinity. Infinity squared, yep, still infinity. You can throw almost anything at infinity. And it doesn't flinch. It just stares back at you like, is that the best you've got? And maybe that's why Hilbert made this hotel, to remind us that our human logic, the kind we use for counting apples or paying bills, doesn't always hold up when we step into the realm of the infinite. Infinity doesn't care about your logic. It dances to its own tune. I like to imagine that Hilbert himself knew how funny this was. I picture him chuckling as he explained the idea, like a magician showing off a card trick, except instead of pulling a rabbit out of a hat, he pulled infinity out of a hotel lobby, and once you've seen the trick, you can't unsee it. So here's where we are. You've checked in. You've survived the first paradox. You've witnessed an infinite bus unload its passengers. You've seen the impossible shuffle of guests moving to even-numbered rooms. And maybe, just maybe, you're starting to feel the tug of infinity on your brain. That strange mix of confusion and wonder, where nothing makes sense, and yet somehow it all works out. And trust me, this is just the beginning. The infinite hotel has more surprises in store, because if you thought fitting one infinite bus was wild, wait until the trains arrive. You've now seen Hilbert's hotel pull off some pretty wild tricks. It was full, yet you still got a room. It squeezed in a busload of people. It even swallowed an infinite bus without breaking a sweat. By this point, you're probably thinking this hotel is magic. It can never actually be full. And that's exactly the illusion. The infinite hotel is always full, but it's never too full. It is both at capacity and somehow endlessly expandable. And the more you think about it, the stranger it gets. Let's rewind for a moment. In the real world, the concept of full is pretty straightforward. If your water bottle is full, you can't pour in more without spilling it all over your lap. If a stadium is full, people are stuck outside buying overpriced hot dogs instead of watching the game. Full means full. End of story. But infinity laughs at our little human word full. Infinity says, "Oh, sweet summer child, you think I have limits? That sip's adorable." Here seps the heart of the illusion. Infinity can hold everything you throw at it, and still look exactly the same as before. Add one person, add 1,000,000 people, add 1,000,000,000 galaxies of people. It doesn't set matter. Infinity never changes. It just shrugs and says, "Sure, come on in." Now that sounds nice and generous, but it also feels like cheating. If numbers are supposed to be strict and logical, infinity is like the rebellious teenager who doesn't follow the rules. You ground it, it sneaks out anyway. You give it homework, it doodles on the margins. Infinity is math's troublemaker. Let's play with this idea. Imagine you're a guest at Hilbert's hotel again. You're brushing your teeth, humming a little tune, when suddenly the fire alarm goes off. You grab your shoes and run into the hallway. A voice on the intercom says, "Attention guests, we need everyone to move down one room to make space." And you think, fine, I'll humor them. But then the announcement repeats, and repeats again. Every hour, more new guests arrive. Every time the shuffle begins, and you realize this will never end. It's a never full loop, always full, always making space, like a cosmic game of musical chairs, except no one ever loses their seat. Now here's the part that really bends the brain. If the hotel is infinite, and you start moving people around, how do you even know who ends up where? In a normal hotel, it's simple. Room 1 moves to room 2. Room 2 moves to 3. Easy. But when the shuffle involves infinity, like moving everyone to double their room number, it creates an endless cascade, a kind of domino effect that never finishes, but somehow works. This is why mathematicians love Hilbert's hotel. It feels like a joke, but it also shows something very real about infinite sets. Infinity is not just a number we can tack onto the end of a list. It's a different beast entirely. Let me give you another analogy. Think about Netflix. You scroll and scroll and scroll, and the shows never seem to end. It feels infinite. But of course, it isn't. Netflix has a huge but finite library. Eventually, the scroll bar stops. But Hilbert's hotel, that scroll bar would never end, ever. And if Netflix actually were infinite, you could add another 1,000 shows tomorrow, and it would still feel the same, endless. That's the illusion. Or take pizza. If you order a pizza with infinite slices, don't ask me how, just go with it. You could eat one slice and you'd still have infinite slices left. You could eat half the pizza, and still, infinite slices. You could invite the entire population of Earth to share, and still, infinite slices. That's not how normal food works, but that's exactly how infinity works. It never gets smaller, no matter how much you take away. And here's the kicker. It never gets bigger either. Add 1, add 1,000,000, add 1,000,000,000, no change. Infinity is like the ultimate poker face. This leads to some hilarious consequences. Imagine checking the hotel's occupancy board. It says, infinite guests, rooms infinite, available rooms infinite. You'd think, wait, that's nonsense. But it's perfectly consistent in the world of infinity. Now, don't get me wrong, not everyone enjoyed this joke. When Hilbert first introduced the hotel, many philosophers and theologians hated it. They argued it was absurd, dangerous, even. They thought infinity should stay in the realm of the divine, not be dragged into a silly hotel sketch. And honestly, you can see their point. Infinity does feel like something almost sacred. It's so huge, so untouchable, that trying to make it concrete feels like poking a sleeping dragon with a stick. But Hilbert poked, anyway, with a smile, because he knew that if you can laugh at something, you can start to understand it. Let me tell you a quick story. There's an old saying in mathematics. Infinity is not a number, it's an idea. And yet we treat it like a number all the time. We talk about infinity plus 1, infinity times 2, infinity divided by infinity. Kids joke about it on the playground. Philosophers argue about it over coffee. And Hilbert's hotel brings that playground spirit right into the heart of math. It makes infinity tangible, even if it's absurd. I sometimes wonder what it would be like if Hilbert's hotel were real. Imagine booking it on a travel app. You see the reviews, location, impossible to find, service confusing but friendly, rooms infinite, breakfast infinite pancakes. Parking, also infinite, but somehow still full. Wouldn't you be tempted to stay just once? The truth is, Hilbert's Hotel is not really about hospitality. It's about imagination. It's a way of showing that math is not dry, not rigid, not boring. It's playful. It can tell stories, create worlds, mess with your head, and still teach you something profound. And here's what you've learned so far. Infinity is never full. It cannot be contained. It breaks the logic we use every day, and it does so with a grin. The never full illusion is not just a trick. It's a glimpse into how math lets us touch the infinite without leaving our chair. So next time you hear the word infinity, don't just picture stars or endless space. Picture Hilbert Septer's hotel. Picture the shuffle of guests moving down hallways that never end. Picture a front desk clerk calmly saying, "We sup full, but don't worry, we sup will make space." And as strange as it seems, that's the truth of infinity. Always full, and never full. A paradox wrapped in a hotel bathrobe. But don't get too cozy yet, because as wild as this illusion is, things are about to get even stranger. The never full hotel is just the warm-up. Next, we'll take infinity out of the hotel and drop it into your everyday life. And trust me, once you start seeing infinity in grocery lines and laundry baskets, you'll never look at the world the same way again. Let's step outside the hotel for a moment, because Hilbert's Hotel is a fun story, but it's also a window into how infinity sneaks into everyday life. You don't need a bow-tied German mathematician running a cosmic hotel to see it. You can just go grocery shopping. Picture this. It's Saturday afternoon. You need milk, bread, maybe a frozen pizza or two. You walk into the store, grab your cart, and immediately regret your life choices, because every checkout line is packed. People with carts overflowing, mountains of cereal boxes, towers of toilet paper, enough frozen chicken nuggets to feed a small army. You pick a line because you have to pick something. But no matter what, the line moves like molasses. You wait, and somehow the other lines always seem faster. You know this feeling. It's universal. Now imagine if that line never ended. Not just long, but infinite. No matter how far back you stand, there's always someone ahead of you. A guy with 47 coupons. A family debating which gum to buy. Someone who forgot an item and just sprinted back to grab it. Forever. That's the infinite grocery line. It's basically Hilbert's Hotel, but with more fluorescent lighting and fewer clean carpets. Now, here's the fun part. In a real line, if someone cuts in front of you, you get angry. You feel cheated. But in an infinite line, cutting doesn't matter. There's always room to squeeze in. The person at position 50 can move to 51. The person at 51 moves to 52. Just like Hilbert's guests shifting down the hallway. Infinity always makes space. You might be thinking, okay, but what's the point? Why imagine an infinite checkout line when the normal one already feels infinite enough? Because it helps us see how strange infinity really is. When the line is infinite, the usual rules break down. Long no longer means anything. 10 minutes of waiting, 10 hours, 10 centuries. If the line never ends, the length doesn't matter. And this is where it gets funny. Imagine the cashier at this store. She's scanning items one by one. Beep, beep, beep. She's been working for an eternity, but the line never gets shorter. People keep joining. And every time she finishes one cart, there are infinitely many left. That's the definition of a hopeless job. You'd need infinite patience, or at least infinite coffee. But here's the twist. Even though the line is infinite, you can still get served, because just like in Hilbert's Hotel, if the cashier reorganizes the line, say telling everyone to move to even-numbered spots, she can open up infinitely many new spaces. Suddenly, infinite new customers can join, and the process still works. It's such ridiculous. but it's such also a real property of infinite sets. The infinite grocery line shows us that infinity is not big. It's such not really, really huge. It's such something fundamentally different. It breaks the meaning of words like long, full, and even finished. Let me give you another example. Think about pizza. Yes, again with the pizza. Say you cut a pizza into infinite slices. Don't ask me how, just roll with it. If you eat one slice, you still have infinite slices left. If you eat half the pizza, still infinite slices left. Invite the entire population of Earth, and everyone gets a slice and still infinite slices left. That's infinity in snack form. Or think about Netflix. You open the app and the list of shows just goes on forever. Scroll, scroll, scroll. It feels infinite. Of course, it isn't. But imagine if it were. You could watch for 1,000 lifetimes, and still there would be infinite shows left unwatched. The never-ending grocery line is the same idea, but less entertaining and with more cranky shoppers. Now, here's a fun historical tidbit. Mathematicians and philosophers have been thinking about infinite lines for centuries. Zeno of Elea, a Greek philosopher from 2,500 years ago, came up with famous paradoxes. One of them goes like this: to walk across a room. First you must go halfway, then you must go half of what's left, then half again, and so on forever. Which means, in theory, you can never actually get across the room because there are infinite steps. It's the world's worst excuse for being late to dinner. Sorry I couldn't make it, honey. There were infinite halves in my way. The infinite grocery line is Zeno's paradox with shopping carts. You keep moving forward, but the finish line always feels out of reach. And yet, somehow you do eventually pay and leave. That's the tension. Infinity is both impossible and practical at the same time. Let's add a little humor here. Imagine you're standing in line, and suddenly an announcement comes over the speaker. Attention shoppers. Due to an unexpected delivery of infinite frozen pizzas, we ask all customers to please move down one cart length to make space. And everyone just sighs and does it. Nobody is surprised, because in an infinite store, that's just Tuesday. Now, if you're wondering why Hilbert made his hotel about rooms instead of grocery lines, the answer is simple. Hotels sound fancier, but the idea is the same. Infinity sneaks into places we think we understand. Grocery lines, pizza slices, Netflix scrolls. Every time you think you've reached the end, infinity taps you on the shoulder and says, "Not yet." And maybe that's why infinity feels so strange. Our brains are built to handle big. We can imagine a mountain, a galaxy, maybe even billions of stars, but infinity refuses to fit. It breaks the mold, and Hilbert's hotel, or our grocery line, lets us glimpse that strangeness in a way that's both funny and a little unsettling. So next time you're at the store, stuck behind someone with 43 jars of pickles, just imagine you're in the infinite line. Imagine Hilbert himself, standing at the register, calmly scanning items for eternity. And remember, no matter how long it feels, at least your line is not actually infinite. You will eventually escape. Probably. But before you breathe a sigh of relief, keep in mind, infinity isn't just hiding in grocery stores. It's also lurking in your laundry basket. And trust me, once you start pairing infinite socks, things get even messier. Let's leave the grocery store for now, because there's another place where infinity shows up. And it's a place far scarier than any hotel or supermarket. It's your laundry basket. Yes, laundry. The true endless cycle of human existence. You wash, you dry, you fold, you think you're done, and then, somehow, the basket is full again. It's like magic, but the evil kind of magic. The socks in particular, they have a mind of their own. You put in 10 pairs of socks, but only 9 come out. Where did the missing sock go? Nobody knows. Some say the washing machine eats them. Some say they slip into another dimension. Personally, I think socks are plotting against us. Now imagine this problem, but with infinite socks. Welcome to the infinite laundry problem. Here's how it works. Picture an infinite number of socks piled high in your laundry basket. The mountain of socks stretches beyond the horizon. Polka dots, stripes, neon green, mysterious stains you don't want to think about. All infinite. And your task? Pair them up. Simple, right? Just grab two of the same and fold. But infinity laughs again, because even though there are infinite socks, the job never ends. You could pair socks forever, and you'd still have infinite left. You could spend lifetimes folding. Your children could fold. Your grandchildren could fold. And still the pile would never shrink. It's basically Hilbert's hotel, but in your laundry room. Let's make this sillier. Imagine Hilbert himself doing laundry. He's standing there with his bow tie, calmly folding socks for eternity. Every time he matches a pair, he sighs with satisfaction. But when he looks at the basket, it's just as full as before. He could invite all the mathematicians of history to help. Newton, Leibniz, Gauss, Euler, even Einstein, and together they'd still make no progress. Infinity always wins. Now, here's where it gets tricky. What if your socks aren't neatly organized? What if they're scattered randomly through the pile? If you have infinitely many socks, how do you know if you'll ever find both members of a pair? This is not just a silly laundry problem. It's actually a deep mathematical question. In set theory, mathematicians talk about infinite sets and how to match things up. Pairing infinite socks is just a playful way to think about it. Georg Cantor, the man who formalized the math of infinity, loved these kinds of problems. He showed that some infinite sets can be matched up perfectly, like one sock to another, but other infinite sets are too large to be paired in that way. Some infinities are literally bigger than others, which means not only could you fail to finish folding your infinite socks, you might not even be able to match them all in principle. Infinity has no mercy. And here's the best part. Mathematicians actually use socks in serious discussions about infinity. They call it the infinite sock drawer problem. The question is, if you have infinitely many socks in a drawer, can you guarantee at least one matching pair? The answer is yes, but proving it takes careful logic, which means somewhere, in the ivory towers of mathematics, brilliant minds are debating socks, not nuclear physics, not curing diseases. Socks, that's the power of infinity. It makes even laundry profound. Now, let's lighten the mood again. Imagine a laundromat with infinite washing machines. You walk in with your infinite socks, and the machines are lined up in an endless row, machine 1, machine 2, machine 3, forever. You put one sock in each machine, and still you have infinite left. The laundromat owner smiles. "Don't worry," she says, "we'll never run out of quarters." That's nice, but you'll still never get your socks back in pairs. Or picture an infinite clothesline, socks stretching across the sky, dangling over cities, rivers, mountains, even space. Astronauts floating past, dodging socks as they orbit Earth. And still, no matter how many you hang, the basket is just as full. The infinite laundry problem is the household version of Hilbert's hotel, always full, never finished. This is why infinity is so strange. It takes ordinary things we think we understand, like socks, and makes them impossible. Infinity sneaks into our lives and turns chores into paradoxes. It's frustrating, but also kind of hilarious. Now, here's a fun connection. In computer science, programmers sometimes joke about infinite loops, a program that never ends, repeating itself forever. Laundry is basically humanity's infinite loop. Wash, dry, fold, repeat. You never reach the end, which means laundry is the closest most of us will ever come to understanding infinity in real life. And maybe that's the lesson here. Infinity isn't just out there in space, with galaxies and black holes. It's in your laundry basket. It's in the chores that never end, the dishes that pile up, the emails that refill overnight. Infinity is not distant, it's daily. But socks are especially poetic. They go missing, they multiply, they defy order, they are tiny little rebels. And when you imagine them stretching to infinity, you realize just how strange the concept really is. So next time you lose a sock, don't be angry. Just smile and think of Hilbert. Somewhere in the Infinite Hotel there's a room reserved for lost socks. Room number infinity -1 probably. And it's already occupied. But before we check into that room, let's take a detour. Because infinity isn't just hiding in laundry baskets. It's also lurking in the stories we tell, the shows we binge, the movies we watch. Infinity has made its way into pop culture, and some of the strangest, funniest examples are waiting for us in the next chapter. Infinity is not just a math thing. It's not locked away in textbooks with scary symbols and dusty chalkboards. It has slipped into the stories we tell, the movies we watch, the games we play. Pop culture has fallen in love with infinity, because infinity is mysterious, dramatic, and sometimes even funny. Let's start with a classic. Douglas Adams, author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Adams loved infinity. His books are full of absurd jokes about endless space, impossible distances, and ridiculous cosmic scales. There's a line about space being big, really big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. And that's not even infinity yet. That's just big. Infinity is the next level. Adams also gave us the concept of the restaurant at the end of the universe. Imagine dining while literally watching time end. That's Hilbert's hotel energy right there. Ordinary things like dinner, mixed with cosmic infinity. Comedy gold. Now jump to another corner of pop culture. Doctor Who, the Doctor's time machine, the TARDIS, is famously bigger on the inside. Step in, and you find infinite rooms, infinite hallways, infinite wardrobes. Sound familiar? It's basically Hilbert's hotel disguised as a blue police box. Fans joke about the Doctor losing companions inside because the corridors never end. Infinity wrapped in sci-fi charm. And then, of course, there's Marvel's Avengers. Infinity Stones. Infinity War. Infinity Gauntlet. If you name something infinity, it automatically sounds more powerful. It's not the glove of large numbers. It's the Infinity Gauntlet. Way cooler. And when Thanos snaps his fingers and wipes out half the universe, that's infinity flexing its muscles. The story isn't really about math, but it borrows the drama of infinity to feel epic. Video games love infinity too. Think of games with infinite lives or infinite ammo, cheat codes that make you unstoppable. Even casual games play with the concept. Endless runners like Temple Run or Subway Surfers literally never end. You keep going until you mess up, but the game itself could go on forever. That's infinity. Gamified. Music gets in on the action as well. Bands write songs about infinity. Think about lyrics like I love you forever and a day, or to infinity and beyond. Okay, that last one is Buzz Lightyear from Toy Story, but you get the point. Buzz made infinity into a catchphrase, a goofy one, but still, kids shouted it on playgrounds for years. Infinity plus one, the ultimate comeback. Even if it makes no mathematical sense, it captures the playful spirit of infinity. Infinity also shows up in art. The artist M.C. Escher made prints of staircases that loop forever, hands drawing each other, fish that repeat endlessly. His work looks like Hilbert's hotel had a baby with a funhouse mirror. Escher wasn't doing math directly, but he was channeling infinity visually. People stare at his drawings and feel that same mix of wonder and confusion we get from Hilbert's paradox. And then there are fractals. You've probably seen them even if you don't know the name. Zoom into a pattern and it keeps repeating forever. The Mandelbrot set is the most famous. Psychedelic spirals that go on infinitely in every direction. They've shown up in posters, album covers, even screensavers in the 90s. Yes, fractals were once considered cool screensaver material. Ask your parents. The funny thing is, a lot of pop culture uses infinity in ways that are totally wrong, mathematically speaking, but that's okay. Infinity is flexible. It doesn't mind being borrowed. It can be poetic, dramatic, or just silly. Take sitcoms, for example. Characters will say, "This meeting feels like it's taking infinity years." Obviously it isn't, but it captures the feeling of endlessness. Infinity is not just a number, it's an emotion. The emotion of waiting forever in traffic, or watching a movie that should have ended 40 minutes ago. But sometimes pop culture gets deep. In movies like Interstellar, the idea of infinity shows up in the form of time. A black hole stretches time to infinity, leaving characters trapped in loops and paradoxes. That's Hilbert's hotel, but with more spaceships and crying astronauts. Infinity becomes not just a joke, but a way to explore our fears about time, space, and death. Here's something interesting. Infinity also sneaks into religion through pop culture. How many times have you heard eternal love in songs, movies, or wedding vows? That's infinity, dressed up as romance. Forever is the same as infinite, and people find comfort in it. Infinity means no end, no goodbyes, just endless continuation. Even comedy routines play with infinity. Think about stand-up comics joking about infinite breadsticks at restaurants. It's a silly exaggeration, but it lands because infinity feels absurd. Imagine a waiter actually bringing you breadsticks forever. Eventually, you'd be buried alive under carbs. The point is, infinity has escaped the chalkboard. It's everywhere in culture because it speaks to something in us. It's both funny and terrifying. It makes things feel epic, but also absurd. It's the ultimate exaggeration, and humans love exaggeration. And maybe that's the genius of Hilbert's hotel. It was never meant to stay inside math. It was always a story that could wander into books, movies, games, songs, a story that could make people laugh and scratch their heads at the same time. So next time you watch a superhero clutching an infinity stone, or see a kid shout infinity plus one, or get lost staring at an Escher staircase, remember you're in the same universe as Hilbert's hotel. Pop culture is just another infinite hallway, filled with references and echoes of this strange idea. But don't get too lost in Marvel movies or endless Netflix binges, because our story is heading back to the mathematicians who started all this madness. And the next stop is a man named David Hilbert himself, the quiet genius who opened the front desk of the strangest hotel in the universe. So far, we've been wandering through this impossible hotel, moving guests around, squeezing in buses and laughing at paradoxes. But maybe it's time we meet the guy behind it all, the man who dreamed up this strange, endless building in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce David Hilbert. Now, Hilbert wasn't your typical mad scientist with wild hair and lightning bolts in the background. He was, by all accounts, calm, thoughtful, and surprisingly cheerful. Imagine a professor who could break your brain with equations, but also crack a dry joke while doing it. That was Hilbert. He was born in 1862 in Königsberg, a city in what is now Russia but was then part of Germany. Funny enough, Königsberg was also home to one of the most famous math puzzles in history, the 7 Bridges of Königsberg. People in the city used to wonder if you could walk across all 7 bridges without crossing the same one twice. Spoiler, you can't. That little puzzle ended up inspiring graph theory, a whole branch of math. So Hilbert basically grew up in a city soaked in math problems. As a kid, Hilbert wasn't seen as a prodigy. He wasn't solving calculus at age 5 or anything dramatic like that. But he was curious, sharp, and had this calm persistence. He went on to study math seriously at university, and pretty soon people realized this guy was special. Hilbert had a gift for making complicated ideas feel clear. He loved structure, elegance, and above all, playfulness. Where other mathematicians argued fiercely and guarded their work like dragons hoarding gold, Hilbert was more relaxed. He believed math should be open, collaborative, and even fun. One of his most famous sayings was, "We must know, we will know." That was his attitude. There's no problem too hard, no question too big. Just keep working, and eventually we'll figure it out. But don't let the calm exterior fool you. Hilbert had wild ideas. He wasn't content to just do math the old-fashioned way. He wanted to reorganize the entire subject, to put it on rock-solid foundations. He wanted every math problem to be solvable, every question to have a clear yes or no answer. Of course, that dream didn't quite work out. A younger mathematician named Kurt Gödel came along and proved that actually some math questions can never be answered. Period. Gödel basically threw cold water on Hilbert's grand plan. But here's the thing. Hilbert didn't sulk. He didn't rage. He admired Gödel's brilliance. That's the kind of person he was. Calm, generous, and genuinely excited by ideas, even when they proved him wrong. Now let's talk about Hilbert's hotel. He introduced it not in a formal research paper, but as a kind of playful thought experiment. He wanted to show people just how weird infinity is. He could have written dry theorems with lots of symbols, but instead he gave us a hotel, a story, a metaphor, something anyone could imagine. That was Hilbert's genius. He knew math is not just about numbers, it's about imagination. And imagination works best when it's funny, vivid, even a little absurd. Let me share a fun anecdote about him. Hilbert was known for being supportive of his students, but also brutally honest. Once, a student failed to solve a problem in his class. The student admitted, "I didn't understand it." Hilbert replied, "That's no excuse. You should never understand it. You should only prove it." It sounds harsh, but he meant it as a joke. For Hilbert, the point of math wasn't to feel comfortable. It was to push into the uncomfortable, the strange, the infinite. Another story. One of Hilbert's colleagues was lazy and unproductive, but still got a university salary. People complained he wasn't publishing papers. Hilbert defended him by saying, "He is good for our department. He makes the rest of us look more productive." That dry humor was classic Hilbert. And when Nazi Germany began forcing Jewish professors out of universities, Hilbert, already retired, was asked about the state of mathematics in Germany without those brilliant minds. His response was devastating. He said, "Mathematics in Germany? There is none anymore." It was his quiet way of condemning the cruelty he saw around him, calm but sharp. So here we have this man, calm genius, dry wit, huge dreams. And in the middle of all his serious work, he gives us a silly hotel with infinite rooms. Why? Because he knew stories matter. He knew people remember tales, not formulas. And through that story, generations of students, teachers, and even YouTube listeners like you can peek into the strangeness of infinity. It's funny to imagine Hilbert as the hotel manager, standing at the desk, moving guests around with a smile, explaining patiently why the hotel is full but also not full. He probably would have loved that image, because it makes infinity not just a scary abstract thing, but something human, approachable, even playful. And maybe that's Hilbert's greatest legacy. Not just the hotel, but the attitude behind it. That math doesn't have to be intimidating. That even the biggest, weirdest concepts can be wrapped in humor. That imagination is just as important as logic. So the next time you picture Hilbert Sepp's hotel, don't set imagine some stern mathematician wagging his finger at you. Imagine Hilbert smiling, bow tie straight, calmly saying, "Yes, infinity is strange. Yes, it Sepp's confusing. But isn't Sept it fun?" Because that was Hilbert, the calm genius with wild ideas. And speaking of wild ideas, wait until you meet George Cantor, the man who decided one infinity wasn't enough. That's right. There are bigger infinities, and Cantor was the mathematician brave. or maybe foolish enough to prove it. If Hilbert was the calm hotel manager, smiling as he shuffled guests down endless hallways, then Georg Cantor was the guy who built the hotel's blueprint in the first place. And unlike Hilbert, Cantor's relationship with infinity was not calm at all. It was dramatic, passionate, a full-on soap opera between one man and the biggest concept in mathematics. So let's meet Georg Cantor. Born in 1845 in Russia, raised mostly in Germany, Cantor was a mathematical prodigy from a young age. He loved numbers the way some kids love soccer or video games, but Cantor wasn't just interested in arithmetic or geometry. He wanted to grapple with the ultimate question, what is infinity? Up until then, infinity was a slippery word. Philosophers debated it. Theologians argued about it. Mathematicians avoided it, because it was messy and dangerous. Infinity had the reputation of a troublemaker. People said, don't touch it, don't even think about it. Leave infinity to God and stick to the numbers you can actually count. But Cantor dove in head first. He wanted to tame infinity. He wanted to make it precise, to give it structure, to make it behave like real mathematics. And here's the twist. He succeeded. At least partly. Cantor's big breakthrough was realizing that infinity is not just one thing. There are different sizes of infinity. That sounds impossible at first. Infinity is infinity. Right, you can't get bigger than endless. But Cantor showed otherwise. Here's how. Take the set of natural numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on forever. That's infinite. Now take the set of even numbers 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on forever, also infinite. At first it looks like the even numbers are smaller since you're only taking half, but Cantor proved they're the same size. You can pair every natural number with an even number, 1 with 2, 2 with 4, 3 with 6, and so on. Perfect match. Same infinity. So far, so good. But then Cantor looked at a different set. The real numbers, that's all the decimals, like 1.5, 2.7, 1, p, square roots, endless digits everywhere. And here's the mind blower. Cantor proved there are more real numbers than natural numbers, not just a lot more, an entirely bigger infinity. How did he prove it? With a trick called the diagonal argument. Imagine you try to list all the decimals between 0 and 1. You think, sure, it's infinite, but I can list them one by one if I try. Cantor said nope. No matter how you list them, he can always create a new number that isn't on your list by tweaking the diagonal digits, which means your list can never be complete, which means the infinity of real numbers is larger than the infinity of whole numbers. This was shocking, not just because it was clever, but because it meant infinity itself comes in layers. An infinite ladder of infinities. The natural numbers were just the bottom rung. Above them were bigger infinities. And above those, even bigger ones. It was like Cantor had discovered entire galaxies of mathematical infinity, hidden in plain sight. Some people celebrated this. They called it genius. Others hated it. They said Cantor was insane, reckless, even dangerous. Famous mathematicians like Leopold Kronecker dismissed his work, calling him a corrupter of youth. Some critics even said Cantor was playing God by trying to define infinity. And sadly, Cantor took it all personally. He struggled with depression. He spent time in sanatoriums trying to recover from breakdowns. His battle with infinity was not just intellectual, it was emotional. It consumed him. But here's the thing. Today, Cantor's work is considered one of the greatest achievements in the history of math. His theory of infinite sets laid the foundations for modern mathematics, computer science, and logic. Every time we talk about Hilbert's hotel, every time we joke about infinite socks or buses, let's pause and appreciate this. Cantor took the most intimidating concept in all of human thought, endlessness. You know what? I can work with this. And he did. He found order in chaos. He gave us the language to talk about infinity in a precise way. Now, let's have some fun with it. Imagine Cantor visiting Hilbert's hotel. He checks in, looks around and says, "Nice place, infinite rooms, very clever. But have you considered building an even bigger hotel, one that fits a higher infinity?" And Hilbert just smiles politely, thinking, "Oh boy, this guy again." Because for Cantor, Hilbert's hotel was just the beginning. Sure, it shows how infinity is weird, but Cantor's work says infinity itself has no ceiling. You can climb forever, finding bigger and bigger infinities, and you'll never reach the top. That's both awe-inspiring and terrifying. And here's a fun fact. Cantor actually connected his work on infinity to theology. He believed the absolute infinity was God. That was the one infinity beyond mathematics, beyond human grasp. It was his way of reconciling the math with his faith. Some people found this inspiring. Others thought it was blasphemy. But either way, it shows how deeply Cantor felt about his discoveries. Let me give you a modern analogy. Imagine you're playing a video game. You find out the world map is infinite. You can walk in any direction forever. That's already mind-blowing. But then someone tells you, actually, there are infinite maps stacked on top of this one, each bigger than the last. That's Cantor's universe. Infinity upon infinity. A staircase with no top step. So what's the takeaway here? Cantor showed us that infinity is not a monolith. It's not one single thing. It's a whole spectrum with different levels and sizes. And that realization cracked mathematics wide open. Of course, the price was heavy for Cantor himself. He lived much of his life feeling misunderstood, battling both critics and his own mind. But in the long run, his work triumphed. Today he's remembered as the man who revealed the true depth of infinity. So next time you think of infinity, don't just imagine one endless line. Imagine Cantor, standing bravely against a storm of criticism, pointing upward to a ladder of infinities, climbing higher and higher into the unknown. And if you thought one infinity was confusing, wait until you hear how society reacted, because when infinity hit history, philosophy, and even the church, things got messy, really messy. Infinity is not just a math problem. It has been a scandal, a troublemaker, a concept so wild that for centuries people argued, fought, and sometimes even banned it. Infinity has been treated like forbidden fruit, tempting, dangerous, and maybe too powerful for human minds to handle. Let's rewind the clock way back. Ancient Greece. The philosophers were obsessed with big questions. What is truth? What is beauty? What's the deal with olives? And of course, what about infinity? Zeno of Elea, whom we mentioned earlier, was one of the first to really stir the pot. He invented paradoxes to show that infinity made no sense. Remember his famous story of Achilles and the tortoise? Achilles gives a tortoise a head start in a race. He runs fast, but every time he catches up to where the tortoise was, the tortoise has moved a little further. According to Zeno's logic, Achilles never wins. He's stuck in an infinite loop. People laughed, scratched their heads, and argued about it for centuries. Then there was Aristotle. Aristotle did not like infinity. He believed infinity could only exist as a potential, never as an actual thing. You could keep counting forever. Sure, but there was no such thing as a completed infinity. For him, infinity was like a carrot on a stick, always just ahead, but never really in your hand. His view dominated for nearly 2,000 years. If you wanted to be taken seriously, you avoided infinity. Fast forward to the Middle Ages. The church steps in. Infinity suddenly becomes a theological issue. Infinity was seen as something only God could possess. Eternal, boundless, limitless. Humans? No. Math? Definitely not. Infinity was divine territory. If you started talking about infinity in math, it could be interpreted as trying to mess with God's business. not exactly a career booster. By the Renaissance, though, curiosity started bubbling up again. People like Giordano Bruno began talking about the universe as infinite, stars without end, worlds without number. The church did not appreciate this. Bruno was eventually burned at the stake, not just for infinity, but it certainly didn't help. Infinity was dangerous territory. Then came the 17th century, and suddenly things got spicy. Mathematicians like Galileo and Descartes began to flirt with infinity in more serious ways. Galileo pointed out something strange. There are as many perfect squares, 1, 4, 9, 16, and so on, as there are whole numbers. Wait, how can a smaller set be the same size as the bigger set it comes from? Infinity. That's how. People were baffled. Galileo shrugged and called it one of the great mysteries. Later, calculus entered the scene. Thanks to Newton and Leibniz, calculus relies heavily on the idea of infinity, infinitely small steps, infinitely close limits. And let me tell you, that caused a scandal. People accused Newton and Leibniz of using ghosts of departed quantities. Spooky. Mathematicians were working with infinitesimals, numbers so tiny they were basically invisible, but they didn't have a clear explanation. Critics thought it was witchcraft, but it worked, and calculus went on to describe planets, motion, physics, and pretty much the entire modern world. Infinity snuck in through the back door, disguised as math homework. And then, of course, George Cantor arrived in the 19th century. We already met him in the last chapter. Cantor didn't just flirt with infinity, he married it, moved in, and had 1,000 children. He proved that infinity had different sizes. Some mathematicians thought this was brilliant, others thought it was blasphemy. Leopold Kronecker, a famous mathematician of the time, was especially harsh. He called Cantor a charlatan and an enemy of mathematics. Ouch! Kronecker believed math should stick to whole numbers, clear and clean. Infinity was too messy, too dangerous. He even tried to block Cantor's papers from being published. Imagine being so salty about infinity that you sabotage another mathematician's career. That's dedication. The backlash wasn't just academic. Cantor's ideas about infinity touched on theology too. Some religious leaders praised him, saying his vision of higher infinities reflected the greatness of God. Others condemned him, accusing him of overstepping human limits. Cantor himself believed the absolute infinity was divine, which didn't exactly calm things down. So yes, infinity has a history of scandal. It's been banned, mocked, worshipped, and feared. It has ruined reputations and fueled revolutions in thought. People have literally gone to war with words over it. But here's the funny part. While philosophers and theologians were arguing, infinity just kept being infinity, unbothered, endless, patient. It doesn't care if you love it or hate it. It just keeps stretching out forever. And maybe that Sipt's why Hilbert Sipt's Hotel is such a brilliant metaphor. It takes this long, scandalous history and wraps it in humor. Instead of arguments and accusations, it gives us bellhops and room keys. It says, relax. Infinity is weird, but we can laugh about it. Think about it. Zeno gave us paradoxes to confuse us. Aristotle told us infinity wasn't real. The church tried to guard it. Cantor battled his peers to prove it had layers. And then Hilbert comes along and says, here's a hotel. Check in. Let's play. It's almost like comic relief after centuries of drama. Infinity has always been scandalous because it threatens the way we think about limits. Humans like boundaries, beginnings and endings. We like to count things, finish tasks, close doors. Infinity doesn't allow that. It's open-ended, endless, untamed. It laughs at our desire for control, and that scares people. But scandal or not, infinity is here to stay. It's in our math, our science, our art, our imagination. It's too fascinating to ignore. So the next time you think of infinity, don't just picture stars or endless numbers. Picture the scandals. Picture philosophers arguing in togas, Picture theologians clutching their pearls. Picture Cantor staring defiantly at his critics. Infinity is not just a concept, it's a drama that has played out across centuries. And now we bring that drama back to the hotel, because the infinite hotel isn't done surprising us. The next chapter brings new arrivals, not just one bus this time, but whole trains, infinite trains, and things are about to get even more chaotic. You're lying in your hotel bed, finally getting some rest after a long day of paradoxes. The sheets are crisp, the lamp flickers slightly, and just as you start to drift off, there's a noise outside, a low rumble, the sound of an engine. You peek out the window, and what do you see? A bus. But not just any bus. This is no yellow school bus or double-decker tourist bus. This is the infinite bus. A vehicle so long it disappears over the horizon. The doors creak open and passengers begin to spill out. 1, 2, 3, 4. You watch, waiting for the last person, but the line never ends. People just keep coming forever. Welcome to the next level of Hilbert Sipp's hotel. Now remember, every single room is already occupied. The hotel is full. Yet here comes an infinite bus carrying infinite passengers, all demanding rooms. Normally, this would be impossible. In a real hotel, the front desk clerk would faint, the fire marshal would shut everything down, and the guests would riot. But not here. Here, the hotel smiles politely and says, "Of course, we'll make space." How? That Sips the magic trick. Hilbert has a plan. First, he tells every current guest to move to the room that's double their number. Guest in room 1 moves to room 2. Guest in room 2 moves to room 4. Guest in room 3 moves to room 6. Guest in room 4 moves to room 8. And so on. Everyone shifts to even-numbered rooms. What does that leave? All the odd-numbered rooms 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 and infinitely more are now empty. And there are exactly enough of those odd rooms for the infinite passengers from the infinite bus. Problem solved. Take a moment to let that sink in. A hotel that was completely full just made space for an infinite bus. Not one passenger, not 50. Infinite. And it didn't break a sweat. This is where infinity really flexes. It's not just about being big, it's about being elastic. In the infinite world, full doesn't mean what you think it means. You can stretch and shuffle forever. There's always more room. Now, let's imagine this scene a little more. The bus driver steps into the lobby, looking tired. He's been driving for eternity. After all, I've got a few passengers, he says. Understatement of the century. Hilbert nods, makes some notes, and calmly announces, "All current guests, please move to double-numbered rooms. Thank you for your cooperation." And then the chaos begins. Guests grumble, dragging luggage down endless hallways. Bellhops push carts that never seem to reach their destination. Suitcases squeak on wheels for miles. The sound echoes like a marching band of cranky tourists. Meanwhile, the infinite bus passengers shuffle in. Some are excited, some are confused, some are just hungry. Imagine the check-in line at the front desk. It snakes around the lobby, out the door, down the street, into the horizon, and beyond. Yet somehow, every single person eventually gets a room. Infinity works it out. It's both hilarious and unsettling, because in our normal world, logistics matter, beds matter, fire codes matter. But in Hilbert's world, none of that applies. The hotel can absorb infinity like it's nothing. Let's pause here and connect this to real math. What Hilbert is showing us is that infinite sets can be rearranged. The set of natural numbers, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, can be perfectly matched with the set of even numbers 2, 4, 6, 8. At first glance, it looks like the evens are smaller, but Cantor's pairing shows they're the same size of infinity. Hilbert's trick with the bus passengers is just that idea in hotel form. Move the guests to even numbers, and suddenly infinite odds are free. It's a math lesson wrapped in a comedy sketch. And it works, because the absurdity makes it stick. You'll forget equations, but you won't forget an infinite bus unloading in front of a hotel that was already full. Now, let's have a little fun with the details. What does the bus look like? I like to imagine it's painted with stars like the night sky stretching forever. The passengers are a bizarre mix. Astronauts, clowns, accountants, philosophers, all waiting patiently. Some have been on the bus for so long they've grown beards down to their knees. Some brought snacks, probably infinite snacks. Otherwise, how would they have survived? And the driver? Poor guy. He's been behind the wheel for infinity miles. His Spotify playlist ran out centuries ago. He's been listening to the same 2 songs on repeat since the fall of the Roman Empire. That's dedication. The best part is imagining the hotel reviews after this night. 1 star, had to move rooms 3 times because of a never-ending bus. Or 5 stars, loved the cosmic vibe. Infinity bus service was a nice surprise. But here's the deeper point. This isn't just silly storytelling. This is mathematics. It shows us that infinity is counterintuitive. It refuses to follow the rules we take for granted. Full doesn't mean full. Big doesn't mean biggest. There's always more space in infinity. And that's both comforting and a little eerie. Comforting because it means there's always room, eerie because it makes you question reality itself. If infinity can stretch like this in math, what about the universe? Is space infinite? Could there always be room for more galaxies, more stars, more buses? Infinity forces us to think beyond limits. It pokes holes in our tidy definitions. And Hilbert's hotel makes that poking hilarious. So, picture it one more time. You're in your hotel room brushing your teeth. Suddenly the intercom crackles. Attention guests, an infinite bus has arrived. Please move to double-numbered rooms. You sigh, repack your suitcase and start walking. Down the hall, past door after door. The numbers blur together, and you realize this will never end. The hallway stretches into forever, and yet somehow it works. That's Hilbert's genius. He turned infinity into a bedtime story, a paradox you can laugh at while still learning something profound. But don't get too comfortable yet, because if you thought the bus was wild, just wait until you hear the rumble of the infinite train. You'd think that after an infinite bus things couldn't get any weirder. But oh no, the infinite hotel is just getting started, because right after the bus unloads its never-ending stream of passengers, you hear another sound in the distance. A whistle. It echoes across the landscape, long and low. The ground trembles. You look toward the horizon, and there it is, the infinite train. A train so long it wraps around the earth, loops back and still keeps going. Its cars stretch forever, clanking and rattling like an endless metal snake. And guess what? Every car is packed with passengers, infinite cars, infinite people, all of them holding tickets, all of them expecting rooms. The bus was bad enough. The train is chaos. You rush to the lobby, and Hilbert is there, calm as ever, bow tie straight, smile polite. He looks at the crowd and says, "Don't worry, we have plenty of space." Of course he does. It's Hilbert's hotel. But how do you fit infinite passengers from infinite train cars into a hotel that's already full and already holding infinite bus passengers? That sounds like a paradox on top of a paradox. A paradox sandwich. Here's Hilbert's trick. First, he assigns each train car a number, car 1, car 2, car 3, and so on, forever. Then he assigns each passenger within each car a number 2. Passenger 1 in car 1, passenger 2 in car 1, passenger 3 in car 1, same for car 2, car 3, forever. Now he has a giant grid of passengers, rows of cars, columns of passengers, infinite by infinite. Sounds impossible to fit. But Hilbert has a system. He zigzags through the grid diagonally, pairing each passenger with a room number. Car 1, passenger 1 gets room 1. Car 1, passenger 2 gets room 2. Car 2, passenger 1 gets room 3. Then car 1, passenger 3 gets room 4. He keeps weaving diagonally, and magically every single passenger gets matched to a room. This is called a diagonal argument, and it's one of Cantor's favorite tricks. It proves that even an infinite grid can be reorganized into a single infinite line, which means, yes, the infinite hotel can handle the infinite train. It's absurd, it's hilarious, and it's real mathematics. But let's slow down and picture this scene more vividly. The train screeches to a stop. Doors slam open. People pour out. Farmers, clowns, astronauts, philosophers, rock bands, kids on field trips, all stumbling onto the platform. Some are cranky, some are curious, some just need a bathroom. The conductor, frazzled and covered in coal dust, storms into the lobby. "I have infinite passengers," he says. "They all want separate rooms." Hilbert nods. "Of course. Step this way." And then the shuffle begins again. Guests drag luggage down endless corridors, moving rooms yet again. The staff scramble, juggling infinite keys. The train passengers look bewildered, but eventually every single one gets settled. Not one is left without a room. Think about that. Infinite bus plus infinite train plus already infinite guests. And still, no problem. That's the power of infinity. It's elastic. It bends. It accommodates. Now, let's have some fun. What does an infinite train even look like? Imagine standing on the platform, watching it roll by. Hours pass. Days pass. The cars just keep coming. You order lunch, eat it, and the train is still passing. You take a nap, wake up, still passing. You live an entire lifetime, and still the caboose never arrives. It's like watching the credits of a movie that never ends. Just name after name scrolling forever. And the poor conductor, he's been blowing that whistle for eternity. His arm is numb, his mustache is singed, his hat is permanently crooked. Infinite work, no vacation days. Someone give that guy a medal, or at least an infinite coffee. But here's the deeper meaning. The infinite train shows us that infinity can multiply and still be the same size. One infinity plus another infinity equals infinity. Infinity squared equals infinity. Even an infinite grid of passengers can be squeezed into the same hotel. Infinity refuses to grow. No matter how much you add, it's stubborn like that. This idea puzzled philosophers for centuries. How can infinity plus infinity still equal infinity? Shouldn't it get bigger? But Cantor and Hilbert showed that, with the right kind of pairing, it works out. It's not about size, it's about structure. It's mind-bending. And the hotel makes it funny. You can laugh at the absurdity while quietly realizing you're learning something profound. That's the beauty of Hilbert's thought experiment. Now let's imagine the guest reviews after the train arrives. 2 stars. The room was fine, but I had to share the elevator with an entire marching band from car number infinity. Or 4 stars. Appreciated the efficiency. My room number was literally 2 million billion trillion. But hey, at least I got 1. And what about the breakfast buffet the next morning? Infinite guests? Infinite pancakes? Infinite syrup? It sounds wonderful, until you realize you'll never reach the front of the line. Infinity giveth, and infinity taketh away. So what's the lesson here? Infinity isn't just weird, it's consistent. It obeys its own rules. The infinite bus and the infinite train are absurd stories, but they reveal real truths about mathematics. They show us that infinity doesn't collapse under its own weight. It keeps stretching, rearranging, absorbing, always full, yet never too full. And that sits both hilarious and humbling. So the next time you hear a train whistle, imagine the infinite train rolling by, car after car, forever. Imagine the passengers checking into Hilbert's hotel, each one finding a room, no matter how crowded it seems. And remember, infinity has space for all of them. But hold on, because just when you think the hotel has handled every possible challenge, something even bigger arrives. The sky rumbles, engines roar, and the Infinite Airlines touches down. And trust me, if you thought the train was chaotic, wait until you see an infinite fleet of airplanes circling above. Just when you thought the chaos was over, after the infinite bus and the infinite train, you hear a new sound, not the rumble of an engine or the clank of train wheels. This time, it's a roar from the sky. You step outside the infinite hotel and look up. At first you see one airplane, then two, then 10, and then you realize the sky is filled with them. Infinite airplanes, each circling above, waiting to land. Welcome to Infinity Airlines. Now, each plane has infinite seats, and every single one of those seats is full. So that's infinite planes, carrying infinite passengers, each of them infinite in number. It's like infinity turned the volume knob all the way up, snapped it off, and threw it into space. The passengers are peeking out of the tiny oval windows, waving politely, expecting a hotel room when they land. The pilots look stressed, the flight attendants are frazzled, and the intercoms are probably saying, "Please remain seated. Our landing time will be infinite." So how in the world does Hilbert handle this? The hotel was already packed. It absorbed the infinite bus. It absorbed the infinite train. Now it has to fit infinite airplanes filled with infinite people. Surely this is the breaking point. Surely now the front desk clerk will cry. Nope. Hilbert just straightens his bow tie, smiles and says, "Plenty of space, welcome to the hotel." Here's how he does it. He assigns each airplane a number. Plane 1, Plane 2, Plane 3, forever. Then he assigns each seat on each plane a number. Row 1, Seat 1, Row 1, Seat 2, Row 1, Seat 3, on and on. Suddenly you have a giant three-dimensional grid. Planes, rows, seats, infinite stacked on infinite stacked on infinite. Sounds impossible to fit into a hotel hallway, right? But Hilbert knows a trick. He weaves through this three-dimensional infinity, just like he did with the train. Using clever pairings, he lines up every single passenger into one long infinite list, and then, one by one, assigns them to rooms. Done. Everyone fits. Infinity wins again. It's absurd, but it's also math. What Hilbert is showing us is that even infinite infinities can be reorganized into one infinity. Infinity times infinity is still infinity. Infinity cubed, still infinity. No matter how high you stack it, infinity doesn't grow. It just stretches. Now let's stop for a second and picture the scene. Planes are landing one after another, stretching down endless runways. The baggage claim carousel is the size of a continent. Suitcases keep circling forever. Lost luggage? Infinite. The announcement board in the airport flashes. Now arriving Infinity Airlines, Flight Infinity, Gate Infinity. Travelers groan, drag their carry-ons and eventually shuffle toward the hotel. And the poor bellhops. They're sprinting back and forth, hauling infinite luggage to infinite rooms, looking like they might collapse at any moment. The cleaning staff are frantically making infinite beds, and yet, somehow, everything works out. Everyone gets a room. Of course, the reviews are mixed. 1 star, my room was on floor number infinity squared, and the elevator ride took 2 centuries, or 5 stars. Very efficient check-in, despite the infinite flight delays. It's chaos, but it's consistent chaos, because the math behind it all is solid. The infinite hotel doesn't break, it bends, it stretches, but it never collapses. Now let's connect this to real life for a moment. Airplanes actually give us a hint of infinity in the skies. Air travel feels endless sometimes. The lines, the delays, the cramped seats that make you question your life choices. Flying across the ocean, hours feel like eternity. You glance at the in-flight map and it says, estimated time remaining forever. That's Infinity Airlines in miniature. And there's something funny about the way humans react to big numbers. 100 passengers? Manageable? 1,000? Impressive? 1,000,000? Whoa. But infinity? Our brains short circuit. We can't picture it. So Hilbert gives us stories like buses, trains and planes to help us peek into the impossible. Infinity Airlines also shows us something else. Infinity is everywhere. It's not limited to a single dimension, like a line of guests. It can expand into planes, grids, cubes and beyond. And no matter how many layers you add, it's still infinity. That's what makes it both terrifying and comforting. Terrifying, because it feels endless. Comforting, because it reminds us there's always room for more. Now, let's lighten the mood. Imagine the airline's safety announcement on one of these flights. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying Infinity Airlines. In the event of an emergency, oxygen masks will drop from the ceiling. Please note, there are infinitely many oxygen masks, so don't worry. Everyone gets one. Also, our flight attendants will be coming around with infinite bags of peanuts. If you have a peanut allergy, please notify us immediately. Although, to be honest, avoiding peanuts on an infinite plane may be impossible. And the pilots. Imagine their logbooks. Flight duration, infinite. Altitude, infinite. Fuel, infinite. Status, delayed indefinitely. You'd almost feel bad for them, except they signed up for this. The funniest part is realizing that no matter how many buses, trains or airplanes you bring, the infinite hotel always has space. Always. That's not just a joke. It's a property of infinity itself. Add infinity to infinity, multiply infinity by infinity. It all folds back into infinity. That's the paradox, the illusion, the magic. So what's the takeaway here? Infinity is not fragile. It doesn't break when you pile more onto it. It absorbs, it stretches, it laughs at our attempts to pin it down, and Hilbert's Hotel is the perfect stage for this comedy of logic. By now you've seen guests shuffled endlessly, buses unloading forever, trains stretching across the horizon, and airplanes filling the skies, and through it all, Hilbert just smiles and says, "Of course we have room." But here's the twist. All of this chaos, this hotel, this parade of infinite vehicles is just the warm-up. Because behind the humour lies a deeper question: does infinity exist in reality? Or is it just an idea, a dream cooked up by mathematicians with too much free time? That's where we're headed next. From the hotel lobby into the halls of philosophy. From buses and trains into the questions of existence itself. So far, we've been living inside Hilbert's Hotel, a place where buses, trains and even airplanes stuffed with passengers can arrive, and somehow everyone still gets a room. It's silly, it's funny, and it's mathematically sound. But let's step back for a second and ask a serious question. Does infinity actually exist in the real world? Or is it just an idea? A mental toy? A story we tell ourselves? This question has been around for thousands of years, and it's one of the most frustrating ones in philosophy and science, because infinity feels real. We look up at the night sky, and the stars seem endless. We look at numbers and they never stop. But does that mean infinity exists? Let's rewind to the Greeks again. Aristotle had strong opinions about this. He thought infinity only existed as a potential, not as an actual thing. What does that mean? Well, you can always count one more number. That's potential infinity. You never run out. But Aristotle insisted there is no such thing as all numbers together in one completed infinity. That's actual infinity. And he said nope, doesn't exist. For Aristotle, infinity was like a treadmill you can never step off, always running, never arriving. And honestly, that idea makes sense. Think about counting. You start at 1, keep going, 2, 3, 4, 5. You'll never stop, but will you ever reach infinity? No, it's always just out of reach. Infinity in this sense is like the world's most annoying carrot dangling in front of your face. But not everyone agreed with Aristotle. Some philosophers thought actual infinity must exist, especially when it came to the universe. How could space end? What would be at the edge? A giant wall, a cosmic do not enter sign. That felt silly. So they argued the universe must go on forever. Actual infinity. Fast forward to religion. And infinity gets even heavier. For centuries, infinity was tied to God. God was eternal, infinite, boundless. Humans? Finite. The gap between us and the divine was infinity itself, which meant if you were a medieval thinker playing with infinity in math could look suspicious, like trying to sneak into God's territory. But then along came Galileo, Newton, and later Cantor. They didn't ask permission. They just rolled up their sleeves and started wrestling with infinity. For them, infinity wasn't just philosophy, it was practical. You couldn't describe motion, gravity, or calculus without at least dipping into infinite processes. Infinity became a tool. So, back to the question. Does infinity exist in reality? Let's consider a few possibilities. Option 1. The universe is infinite. Some scientists think space has no edge. Galaxies stretch on forever. Stars scattered endlessly. If that's true, then infinity is real. Out there, above our heads, but we don't actually know. It might be finite, just very, very large. If it is finite, then infinity is just a useful idea, not a reality. Option 2. Time is infinite. Maybe the universe has no beginning or end. It just keeps going forever. Some cosmologists argue that time stretches infinitely into the future. Others think it loops, like a cosmic rerun. If time is infinite, then so is the story of existence. But again, do we know for sure? Nope. Option 3. Infinity only exists in math. Numbers are infinite. You can always add one more. But numbers are human inventions, not physical objects. They live in our heads, on paper, in computers, which means infinity is real in math, but not necessarily in the physical world. And here's where the debate gets juicy, because even mathematicians don't always agree. Some treat infinity like a useful tool, others treat it as a real solid thing. Cantor was in the second camp. He believed infinities weren't just ideas, they were as real as anything else in math. For him, the hierarchy of infinities was like a landscape waiting to be explored. But others, like Kronecker, thought Cantor had gone too far. They argued infinity was a fiction, a trick of language, something to use carefully, but not to trust. So what do we do with this mess? Maybe the best answer is this. Infinity is real in some ways and not in others. For example, think about a line in geometry. A straight line goes on forever, in both directions. That's infinity. But does a physical line in the real world go on forever? No. If you draw it on paper, it stops at the edge. If it's a laser beam, it fades. The idea of the line is infinite, but the actual line is not. Or think about the atoms in your body. There are a lot of them, but not infinite. If you count them, eventually you stop. Infinity doesn't live in your body, but if you think about numbers, they never stop. Infinity lives in math. And maybe that's the trick. Infinity is a bridge between reality and imagination. It's how we stretch our minds beyond limits, even if the world itself doesn't stretch quite that far. Let's make this playful for a second. Imagine asking Hilbert himself, "Professor, does infinity exist in reality?" I picture him pausing, adjusting his bow tie and saying, "Reality? Who cares? It exists in math. And that's enough." Then he'd smile and check in another infinite bus of guests. Because maybe infinity doesn't need to exist in the physical sense. Its power comes from what it does to our brains. It stretches us. It forces us to think bigger, to question assumptions, to laugh at paradoxes. Whether or not it's real in the stars above, it's real in the way it changes how we see the world. And maybe that's why infinity has always fascinated us. Because deep down, we want there to be more stars, more time, more possibilities. Infinity represents the more our minds can't stop chasing. So, does infinity exist in reality? The answer is maybe, maybe not. But it definitely exists in our imagination. And sometimes that's just as powerful. And speaking of powerful, let's take this question to the biggest stage of all. The entire universe. Is the cosmos itself infinite? Or is it finite but unbounded, like a sphere? In the next chapter, we'll dive into the math, the science and the mind-bending possibilities of an infinite universe. Infinity is one thing when it's a hotel, or a bus, or even a pile of socks. But let's raise the stakes. What if infinity isn't just a math trick or a metaphor? What if the entire universe itself is infinite? That's the big question. Is the cosmos endless, stretching out forever in all directions, or is it finite? Huge, yes, but with some kind of boundary. This question has kept astronomers, physicists, and philosophers awake for centuries. And tonight, it's going to keep you awake too, or maybe put you gently to sleep while you wonder if space has a no trespassing sign at the edge. Let's start with something simple. Look up at the night sky. If you're in the city, you'll probably see like 3 stars and a plane. But if you're somewhere dark, with clear skies, you'll see thousands, and behind those thousands are billions. And behind those billions are galaxies upon galaxies. From Earth it already feels infinite. You can't see an end. Now, scientists have tried to measure this, the observable universe. The part we can actually detect with telescopes is about 93 billion light-years across, which is already a ridiculous number. 93 billion. You can't even picture that. But here's the catch. That's just the observable part. There could be way more beyond it. Maybe infinitely more. So, is the universe infinite? Well, scientists aren't sure. There are a few possibilities. Option 1. Yes, the universe is infinite. Space just keeps going, never ending, stretching out in all directions. If that's true, then everything we know is just one tiny patch of an endless cosmic carpet. Option 2. The universe is finite but unbounded. Imagine the surface of a sphere, like Earth. It's finite. You can measure its surface area, but you can walk forever without hitting an edge. Some scientists think space might be like that, only in 3 dimensions. No edge, but not infinite either. Option 3. The universe is finite and has boundaries. Somewhere, out there, is the edge of everything. Beyond it, who knows? Maybe nothing. Maybe a cosmic wall with graffiti that says, "Tourists go home." But most cosmologists lean toward the first 2 options, infinite or finite but edgeless. Both are wild to think about. Now, let's play with the consequences. If the universe is infinite, then it contains infinite stars, infinite planets, infinite possibilities, which means somewhere out there there's another Earth, actually infinite other Earths. And on one of them there's another you listening to this exact story, maybe in a slightly different hotel. That's not science fiction, it's math. In an infinite universe, every possible arrangement of matter happens somewhere. You exist again, and again, and again. Infinite versions of you, all brushing your teeth right now. Comforting? Creepy? Both? On the other hand, if the universe is finite, things get just as weird, because what does finite mean at cosmic scale? If space loops back on itself like a 3D sphere, You could, in theory, fly your spaceship in one direction long enough and end up back where you started, like Pac-Man, wrapping around the screen. That's a trip, literally. This isn't just philosophy. Modern physics wrestles with infinity every day. In quantum mechanics, infinity pops up in calculations, sometimes as an error, sometimes as a real feature. In cosmology, infinity appears when thinking about the Big Bang or black holes. And in string theory, well, let's just say infinity has a VIP membership card. Scientists have to constantly ask, are these infinities real, or are they just signs that our math isn't finished yet? Here's a fun historical anecdote. Back in the 17th century, a man named Olbers asked a simple question. If the universe is infinite and filled with stars, why isn't the night sky completely bright? Everywhere you look, your line of sight should eventually hit a star. The sky should glow like the surface of the sun, but it doesn't. This puzzle, called Olbers' paradox, haunted scientists for centuries. The solution came with the Big Bang theory. The universe isn't infinite in age. It had a beginning, and light from distant stars hasn't had time to reach us yet. Problem solved, or at least patched up. But the question still lingers, infinite or not? And here's where it gets fun. If the universe is infinite, then Hilbert's hotel suddenly feels a little less like a story and a little more like real estate. Imagine galaxies as hotel rooms, each occupied, but always with space for more. Buses of stars arriving, trains of galaxies, airlines of black holes, infinity playing out not in thought experiments, but in reality. Of course, infinity at cosmic scale is overwhelming. You start to feel small, tiny, like a speck of dust in an endless desert. But there's another way to look at it. Infinity can also be comforting, because if space is endless, then possibilities are endless too. There's always more to explore. Always another star, another world, another horizon. And if the universe is finite, that's not so bad either. A finite universe is still huge, so huge that for us, it might as well be infinite. You will never in your lifetime visit every star. You will never run out of mysteries. Whether finite or infinite, the universe has more than enough to keep us busy. Now, let's bring it back to humor for a second. Imagine being the manager of the Infinite Universe Hotel. Talk about a nightmare. Billions of galaxies checking in at once. Nebulae requesting extra pillows. Black holes sucking up the minibar. And somewhere poor Hilbert at the front desk, calmly saying, "Don't worry, we have space." So does infinity exist in the universe? We don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. But what we do know is that infinity makes the universe more fascinating. It forces us to stretch our imagination, to think bigger than we ever thought possible. Whether or not it's out there in reality, infinity has already changed how we see the cosmos. And next, we're going to push it even further, because infinity isn't just about math or science, it's also about belief. For centuries, theologians have wrestled with infinity as a way to describe God, eternal, boundless, without end. In the next chapter, we'll see how infinity became not just a mathematical scandal, but also a spiritual one. When you hear the word infinity, your mind might jump to math, galaxies, or maybe even Hilbert's hotel. But for most of human history, infinity wasn't about hotels or paradoxes. It was about God. Theologians loved infinity long before mathematicians tried to tame it, because what better word to describe the divine than without end? Eternal, boundless, infinite. Let's rewind to the early thinkers. Saint Augustine, writing in the 4th century, said God's nature was infinite, not just in time, but in power, in knowledge, in presence. Wherever you go, God is already there. However much you know, God knows infinitely more. For Augustine, infinity wasn't scary, it was comforting. It meant God could never run out of patience, love, or mercy. Fast forward to the Middle Ages. and infinity became a hot theological topic. Scholastic philosophers debated whether infinity was something humans could even comprehend. Thomas Aquinas argued that only God could be infinite in essence. Everything else in creation was finite, because to be infinite was to be perfect. And perfection, he said, belongs only to God. But then along came the mathematicians, sneaking infinity into numbers, lines, and equations. Suddenly, theologians got nervous. Was math trespassing into sacred territory? If infinity belonged to God, what did it mean when humans started playing with it like a toy? Some thinkers tried to bridge the gap. They said mathematical infinity was different from divine infinity. Math's infinity was just potential. You could always add more. God's infinity was actual, already complete, limitless in every way. It was a neat way to keep everyone happy, at least for a while. But when George Cantor showed up in the 19th century and declared that there were different sizes of infinity, things got heated. Cantor himself believed the largest, ultimate infinity, the one beyond all mathematical sets, was God. He even wrote letters saying that his discoveries reflected divine truth. But not everyone agreed. Some theologians accused him of overstepping, of trying to box God into equations. Others celebrated him, saying he had revealed new ways of thinking about the divine. Cantor, poor guy, was caught in the middle. His math was revolutionary, but his belief that the absolute infinity equaled God made him controversial. He wasn't just fighting mathematicians like Kronecker, he was also battling theologians who thought he was treading on holy ground. And honestly, you can see why. Infinity is one of the few concepts that truly captures the idea of the divine. No beginning, no end, no limits. When people pray to God as eternal, they're really invoking infinity. When they imagine heaven as everlasting, they're picturing infinity in time. When they think of God as omnipresent, they're picturing infinity in space. Infinity is God's calling card. Now let's have a little fun. Imagine Hilbert's hotel as a divine metaphor. God as the ultimate hotel manager. Every soul that ever lived shows up at the front desk. The lobby is packed with saints, sinners, philosophers, and maybe your grandma asking for extra towels. The clerk smiles and says, "Don't worry, we have infinite rooms," and sure enough, everyone gets a place. Heaven as Hilbert's hotel, always full but never too full. Kind of poetic, right? Of course, not everyone likes mixing infinity with theology. Some scientists argue it muddies the water. They say infinity should stay in math and physics, while God belongs in philosophy or faith. But the overlap is hard to ignore. Humans have always used infinity as a way to stretch their imagination towards something bigger than themselves. And God has always been the ultimate bigger than ourselves. Here's another fun angle. Infinity is both comforting and terrifying, just like the divine. Comforting because it means endless love, endless life, endless possibility. Terrifying because it means endless time, endless mystery, endless everything. Try sitting quietly and imagining eternity. No end, ever. At first it feels peaceful. Then your brain panics. Wait, no end. What if it gets boring? Eternity is both dream and nightmare. Theologians have wrestled with that paradox forever. Some say infinity is only peaceful if it's set tied to perfection. If heaven is infinite, it must also be infinitely fulfilling. Otherwise, eternity would drive us insane. Others shrug and say that set's why we set not God. We can set comprehend it. But mathematicians love to poke at that line. They say, what if we can comprehend a piece of it? What if our equations are tiny windows into the infinite? That's why Cantor thought his math touched the divine. He wasn't claiming to solve God. He was just saying math gave us a language to glimpse God's scale. And whether you agree or not, it's a beautiful thought. That infinity, whether in numbers or theology, is a bridge between human curiosity and the unknown. Let's bring it back to humor for a second. Imagine a priest, a rabbi, and a mathematician walk into Hilbert's hotel. The priest says, This is proof of God's infinite love. The rabbi says, this is a metaphor for eternity. The mathematician says, actually, it's just a countably infinite set of rooms with clever indexing. And then they all argue in the lobby while Hilbert quietly checks in another infinite bus. Infinity has always blurred the line between math and faith, logic and mystery, and maybe that's why it's so powerful. It refuses to stay in one box. It expands like itself into every corner of thought. So does infinity belong to God, or to math, or to both? The answer depends on who you ask. But one thing is clear. Infinity has always been humanity's favorite way of reaching beyond limits, whether those limits are scientific, philosophical, or spiritual. And that's why infinity never stops stirring debates. It's not just a number, it's not just an idea, it's a mirror, reflecting both our desire to understand the world and our longing for something greater. Now, before things get too heavy, let's pivot. Because infinity doesn't just live in theology or math, it's also hidden in art, in music, in creativity itself, patterns that repeat forever, melodies that echo endlessly, images that spiral without end. In the next chapter, we'll explore how infinity has inspired artists, musicians, and dreamers to create works that feel, well, infinite. Up to this point, infinity has been a prankster. It shows up in Hilbert's hotel, plays with socks and buses, sneaks into theology, and generally messes with our heads. But here's the thing, infinity didn't just confuse people, it changed mathematics forever. Before infinity walked onto the stage, math was about things you could count, measure, and finish. Apples, triangles, bridges. But once infinity showed up, the game changed. Suddenly, math had a whole new dimension. Let's start with calculus. Ah, yes, calculus. Ah, yes, calculus. The word that gives high school students nightmares. But at its core, calculus is all about infinity. You want to know the slope of a curve at a single point? You take infinitely small steps. You want to know the area under a curve? You add up infinitely many slices. Infinity sneaks into every calculation. Newton and Leibniz both leaned on infinity. When they invented calculus in the 17th century, they used infinitesimals, tiny ghost-like numbers that were so small they were basically nothing, but not quite nothing. Critics mocked them. Bishop Berkeley famously called infinitesimals the ghosts of departed quantities, which honestly sounds like the name of a prog rock album. But ghostly or not, infinitesimals worked. They allowed us to calculate motion, gravity, and all the physics that launched the modern world. Fast forward a bit, and mathematicians refined calculus to be more rigorous. Limits replaced infinitesimals, but the core idea stayed. Infinity is baked into the machinery. Without infinity, no calculus. Without calculus, no rockets, no skyscrapers, no smartphones. Infinity isn't just a hotel trick, it's the foundation of modern life. But calculus was just the beginning. Infinity gave birth to whole new branches of mathematics. Cantor's set theory, for example. Before Cantor, people assumed infinity was just one big blob. Cantor cracked it open and showed there were infinitely many infinities stacked in a hierarchy. That changed everything. Suddenly, mathematicians could talk about the size of infinite sets, compare them, and build new theories around them. Then there's analysis, the study of infinite series, infinite sums, infinite processes. Think about the number pi. Its decimal expansion goes on forever, 3.14159, and so on. You can't write it all down, but you can use infinity to understand it, to approximate it, to tame it. Same with e, the exponential constant. Same with square roots, logarithms, trigonometry. So much of math is just humans trying to wrangle infinity into something usable. Infinity even reshaped geometry. Fractals, for example, are shapes that contain infinite detail. Zoom in, and you see the same pattern repeating forever. Coastlines, clouds, trees, they all have fractal properties. Without infinity, we couldn't describe their complexity. And let's not forget probability. Imagine flipping a coin forever. What's the probability of getting heads infinitely many times? Questions like that only make sense when infinity enters the conversation. Statistics, randomness, chaos theory, all of them rely on infinity to make predictions about large numbers and endless processes. So yeah, infinity didn't just change math, it exploded it. It stretched the field into directions no one could have imagined. But here's the funny part. Infinity is still slippery. Mathematicians built entire careers around making it rigorous, but it always leaves a trace of paradox. Take the infinite hotel again. It's logically consistent, but also absurd. That's the dual nature of infinity. It's both useful and ridiculous, both serious and hilarious. And maybe that's why it has such staying power. Infinity refuses to be pinned down. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. Just when you think you've got it, it leaks through your fingers. But those leaks are exactly where the interesting math happens. Now, let's zoom out. Infinity didn't just change math, it changed science too. Physics without infinity? Impossible. Think about black holes. At the center, according to Einstein's equations, density becomes infinite, gravity becomes infinite, space-time curves infinitely. Physicists call it a singularity. Do they like infinities in their equations? Not really, but they're there, staring back, daring us to figure them out. Quantum mechanics? Same deal. Some calculations spit out infinities. Physicists had to invent a trick called renormalization to sweep those infinities under the rug and get finite answers. Feynman, one of the great physicists, once joked that renormalization was like sweeping infinity under the rug and pretending it isn't there. But it worked, and it won Nobel Prizes. So infinity is both the problem and the solution, the troublemaker and the tool. It pushes us to build new math, new theories, new ways of seeing the world. Here's a fun analogy. Imagine math as a house. Before infinity, the house had a few rooms: algebra, geometry, arithmetic, cozy, manageable. Then infinity moved in, and suddenly the house grew endless hallways, staircases that loop forever, rooms inside rooms inside rooms. At first it felt like chaos, but then mathematicians realized, hey, this is actually livable, and they built an entire city inside infinity's house. Of course, not everyone loved this renovation. Some thought infinity ruined the neighborhood. Kronecker famously said, God made the integers, all else is the work of man. He wanted math to stay finite, neat, controllable. Infinity made him uncomfortable. But others, like Hilbert, Cantor, and later Gödel, embraced the madness. They saw infinity not as a problem, but as the ultimate playground. And in many ways that's the story of math itself. Every time infinity shows up, it causes panic. People argue, critics scoff, and then, slowly, infinity becomes normal. Calculus was once scandalous. Now it's in every high school. Set theory was once heresy. Now it's in every math department. Infinity keeps breaking the rules, and then becoming the rules. So how did infinity change mathematics forever? By forcing it to grow, by breaking boundaries, by making math not just about counting apples, but about exploring the endless. Infinity turned math from a tidy garden into a wild, sprawling jungle. Confusing, yes, but also beautiful. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Infinity is not something to solve, it's something to live with. A reminder that no matter how much we learn, there's always more, always another problem, another theorem, another mystery. Infinity guarantees that math and human curiosity will never run out of fuel. So the next time you hear the word infinity, don't roll your eyes. Remember that without it, we wouldn't have calculus, physics, fractals, or even smartphones. Infinity isn't just an idea. It's the engine of progress. And speaking of engines, let's shift gears, because infinity hasn't just shaped math and science, it's also inspired art, music, and creativity in ways you might not expect. From Escher's staircases to Bach's fugues, infinity has been hiding in plain sight in galleries and concert halls, and in the next chapter we'll take a tour through those infinite patterns. When you think of infinity, you probably picture numbers, galaxies, or maybe Hilbert's hotel with its endless hallways. But infinity isn't just hiding in math and science. It's also been sneaking into art studios and music halls for centuries. Artists and composers have always been fascinated by the idea of something that never ends. And honestly, it makes sense. Creativity and infinity go hand in hand. Let's start with visual art. The most famous infinity artist of all time is probably M.C. Escher. You've seen his stuff. Staircases that loop forever, hands drawing each other, lizards crawling in endless patterns. Escher loved playing with repetition and impossible spaces. His prints are basically Hilbert's hotel in picture form. You look at them, and your brain says, wait, what? This staircase goes up, and up, and up, but it also goes down forever. Escher didn't just draw buildings, he drew paradoxes. Escher's work wasn't just trippy decoration. Mathematicians loved him. He visualized ideas from geometry and symmetry in ways equations couldn't capture. One of his most famous pieces, Circle Limit, shows fish getting smaller and smaller as they swim toward the edge of a circle, repeating infinitely. It's actually based on hyperbolic geometry, the math of curved spaces. Infinity disguised as art. But Escher wasn't alone. Islamic art has been exploring infinity for over 1,000 years. If you've ever looked at the tile work in a mosque, you've seen endless repeating patterns. Stars, flowers, geometric shapes stretching across walls and ceilings with no beginning or end. These designs weren't just pretty, they were meant to symbolize the infinite nature of the divine, art as a window into infinity. Then there are fractals. Fractals are mathematical shapes with infinite detail. Zoom in and you see the same pattern repeating again and again forever. The Mandelbrot set is the most famous. It looks like a psychedelic bug from outer space, with swirls and spirals that keep unfolding no matter how close you get. Fractals became a craze in the 1980s, showing up on posters, t-shirts, even dorm room walls. They're math, but they're also art. Infinite art. Now let's switch to music. Because if you think infinity only lives in drawings, you haven't heard Bach. Johann Sebastian Bach loved infinite patterns. His fugues, for example, are like musical fractals. A theme starts, repeats, overlaps, twists and builds, layer on layer like an endless staircase of sound. Some music theorists say Bach was basically composing mathematical infinities with notes. And honestly, if you've ever listened to him, you know it feels that way. Bach wasn't alone either. Other composers experimented with the idea of music that could, in theory, go on forever. Think about a round, like row, row, row your boat. One person starts, another joins in, then another, and it loops endlessly. That's musical infinity in miniature. Simple but hypnotic. In modern times, composers like Philip Glass and Steve Reich took this to the extreme. Minimalist music uses repeating patterns that shift slowly, almost imperceptibly, creating a sense of endless flow. If you've ever listened to Glass's piano pieces, you know what I mean. The music feels like it could go on forever, drifting like waves. And then there's pop culture. Remember the phrase, "this is the song that never ends"? Kids sang it endlessly in the 90s, driving parents insane. That's infinity in music too. Though maybe the evil version, a round so endless. It's basically a weapon. But let's not forget technology. With digital tools, we can now literally create infinite music. Generative programs can spin out endless variations, never repeating. Video games use this trick sometimes. Background music that adapts and flows forever so you never notice it looping. That's infinity, coded into sound. So why do art and music love infinity so much? Probably because infinity captures the feeling of creativity itself. Ideas don't run out. Patterns can keep evolving. Music can echo endlessly. Infinity is both terrifying and inspiring, and artists thrive on that tension. Here's a fun thought. Imagine Hilbert's Hotel hiring an artist in residence. Escher could draw the floor plans. Bach could compose the elevator music. Philip Glass could design the lobby soundtrack, repeating forever, and fractals could decorate the wallpaper, spiraling endlessly across the halls. That hotel would be the strangest art gallery on earth, and beyond. Infinity in art isn't just about beauty, it's about perspective. It reminds us that there's always more to see, more to hear, more to imagine. A pattern doesn't have to stop. A melody doesn't have to end. Just like numbers, art can stretch into forever. And maybe that's why we find it so mesmerizing. Infinity gives us a glimpse of the boundless. When you stare at an Escher print or listen to a Bach fugue, you feel something bigger than yourself. Not just math, not just music, something infinite. So the next time you doodle a repeating pattern on your notebook or get a song stuck in your head that loops endlessly, smile. You're brushing up against infinity, just like Escher, Bach, and all the dreamers before you. And speaking of dreamers, let's shift gears, because infinity hasn't just shaped art and music, it's also woven into the very fabric of our technology, from endless scrolling on your phone to fractals in computer graphics. Infinity is quietly powering the modern world. And in the next chapter, we'll see how infinity jumped from chalkboards and symphonies into the age of the internet. Infinity might sound like something abstract, something locked away in philosophy books or Hilbert's Hotel, but guess what? You carry infinity around in your pocket every single day. Technology has quietly smuggled infinity into our lives, and most of the time we don't even notice. Let's start with the most obvious culprit. The internet. Have you ever opened your phone just to check one quick thing, and then 3 hours later you're still scrolling? That's infinity at work. Social media feeds are designed to feel endless. No matter how far you swipe, there's always another post, another video, another cat meme. It's called infinite scroll, and yes, that's the actual name. Developers looked at Hilbert's Hotel and thought, let's build that but with TikToks. Netflix does it too. You finish a show, and instead of giving you closure, it auto-plays the next episode, and then the next, and the next. Pretty soon you've fallen into what I like to call the infinite couch paradox. You sit down for just one episode, and suddenly the sun is rising, you're dehydrated, and your blanket has fused to your body. Email, same deal. The inbox never ends. You answer one and 3 more appear. It's like battling Hydra. Reply to one message and 2 more take its place. Congratulations, you've entered the infinite office paradox. But infinity isn't just hiding in software tricks. It's baked into the math behind technology. Take computer graphics. Ever wonder how video games create mountains, clouds, or realistic-looking trees? A lot of it is fractals. Fractals are infinite patterns that repeat at smaller and smaller scales. The cool thing is, computers can use these infinite rules to generate realistic landscapes without actually storing every detail. Infinity makes your open-world games possible. Zoom in on a coastline in a game, and it looks rough and jagged because fractals. Zoom in on a snowflake, same thing. It's infinity disguised as realism. Escher would have loved PlayStation. Search engines rely on infinity too. The internet isn't literally infinite, but it's close enough that it feels that way. Billions of websites constantly growing. Google has to crawl and index all of it. Imagine being the librarian in charge of the infinite library. You'd need infinite shelves, infinite patience, and probably infinite coffee. Then there's data streaming. Spotify doesn't actually have infinite songs, but it sure feels like it. You'll never run out. The same with YouTube. Every minute, people upload hundreds of hours of new content. By the time you finish this sentence, more videos have appeared than you could watch in your entire life. That's not infinity in theory. That's infinity in practice. And let's not forget artificial intelligence. Models like the one you're listening to now are trained on massive, almost endless data sets. They sift through so much information that it feels infinite. Of course, it isn't literally infinite, but it's big enough that the illusion is the same. Here's a fun one. Video games with endless modes. Think Tetris, Temple Run, Minecraft. There's no finish line. You can play forever, or until your thumbs give up. That's infinity packaged as entertainment. The design says, don't stop, there's always more, and we fall for it every time. Now, let's bring some humor into this. Imagine Hilbert's hotel with Wi-Fi. Guests would never leave their rooms. Infinite Netflix, infinite Instagram, infinite Candy Crush. The hallways would be empty because everyone would be glued to their phones, lost in infinite scroll. The real paradox wouldn't be the rooms. It would be the battery life. Or picture Hilbert himself trying to check his email. He opens his inbox and gasps. Infinite unread messages, each one politely demanding, please respond at your earliest convenience. Poor Hilbert. Even infinity can't save him from email. But here's the deeper point. Technology uses infinity to trick us, entertain us, and sometimes overwhelm us. Infinite scroll is addictive because our brains are wired to crave closure. We want to reach the end. But infinity means there is no end. It's like chasing a finish line that keeps moving, which is clever from a design perspective, but dangerous for our sleep schedules. Infinity also makes technology powerful. Without infinite processes, fractals, or endless algorithms, we wouldn't have modern graphics, search engines, or machine learning. Infinity is the secret ingredient behind the scenes. And it's not just the internet. Think about math in computers. When programmers talk about loops, they sometimes create infinite loops by accident. That means the program never stops running, chewing up memory until the computer freezes. Infinity is a bug, annoying but kind of poetic. Even storage feels infinite now. Cloud services promise unlimited photos, unlimited files, unlimited backups. Of course, it's marketing exaggeration. Nothing is truly unlimited. But we live in a world where infinity is the sales pitch. Unlimited data plan, infinite entertainment. Infinity has gone mainstream. And maybe that's why it feels both exciting and exhausting. Infinity used to be a scary philosophical concept. Now it's in your pocket, buzzing with notifications. Too much to read, too much to watch, too much to do. We've made infinity practical. And in the process, a little bit stressful. But maybe that's the joke. Hilbert gave us a playful hotel to make infinity feel approachable. Technology gave us infinite feeds, infinite videos, and infinite distractions. The concept hasn't changed. It's just moved into our daily lives. So the next time you're stuck in an endless scroll, smile. You're living Hilbert's paradox in real time. Your feed is the infinite hotel hallway, stretching forever, always with another room to peek into. Always full, never finished. And speaking of finishing, our time in the infinite hotel is almost up. We've checked in buses, trains, airplanes. We've wandered through philosophy, theology, art, music, and technology. But eventually, even infinity stories need a closing chapter. In the next and final stop, we'll check out of Hilbert's hotel and reflect on why infinity keeps pulling us back again and again. It's been a long stay. We've walked the endless hallways, peeked into infinite rooms, dodged buses, trains, and even entire airlines of passengers. We've argued with philosophers, laughed with mathematicians, and gotten lost in art, music, and the internet. And now, finally, it's time to check out of Hilbert's hotel. But here's the funny thing. You can't really leave. not completely. Once you've stepped into Hilbert's paradox, it sticks with you. Infinity doesn't let go so easily. It's like that one catchy song that loops forever in your head. The moment you think you've reached the end, infinity whispers, "Not yet." Still, let's imagine it. You're standing in the lobby, suitcase packed, key card in hand. The bellhop looks exhausted from hauling luggage through endless hallways, but he still manages a polite smile. Behind the desk, Hilbert himself is there, calm, cheerful, bow tie straight. He thanks you for your stay. We hope you found your time with us. Infinite. You nod politely, trying not to think about the fact that you changed rooms 47 times last night. The checkout line, of course, is endless. Guests stretching out forever, each clutching their bills, but somehow everyone will get checked out eventually. Infinity has room for that too. And as you stand there waiting, you start to reflect. What did Hilbert's Hotel really teach us? At first it was just a joke, a silly story about a hotel that's always full, but never too full. A paradox dressed up as a bedtime tale, but underneath the humor is something deeper. Infinity isn't just a number, it's not just a lot, it's a new way of thinking, a new category of existence. Infinity bends the rules. Full doesn't mean full, finished doesn't mean finished. Limits don't mean limits. Infinity reminds us that the universe and our imagination is bigger, stranger, and funnier than we usually realize. It also reminds us that humans love stories. Hilbert could have written a dry theorem with symbols and proofs. Instead, he gave us a hotel, something we can picture, something we can laugh about. And that story has carried the idea of infinity farther than any textbook ever could. But maybe the most surprising thing is how infinity makes us feel. Sometimes it's terrifying. The thought of endless time, endless space, endless everything. It can make your brain wobble. But sometimes infinity is comforting. It means there's always more. More stars, more ideas, more possibilities. Infinity means curiosity never runs out. And maybe that's why Hilbert's Hotel works so well as a bedtime story, because infinity is both stimulating and soothing. It excites your brain, makes you laugh, fills you with wonder, and then, slowly, gently, it reminds you that there's no rush, no finish line, just endless hallways stretching off into the distance. Always more doors to open, always another story to tell. Now, let's not forget the humor. Imagine the Yelp reviews for Hilbert's Hotel. 1 star, too many room changes, hallway never ended. Or 5 stars, excellent service. Would recommend to infinity and beyond. Somewhere Buzz Lightyear would nod in approval. Or picture the poor cleaning staff. They've been making beds for centuries and still haven't reached the end of the hallway. Infinite sheets, infinite towels, infinite tiny shampoo bottles. They probably unionized by now. Even breakfast is absurd. The buffet line is infinite, pancakes stretching forever. The syrup fountain never runs dry, but the line to get coffee, also infinite. Some paradoxes are cruel. And yet, despite all the chaos, the hotel runs smoothly. That's the magic of the story. Infinity feels impossible, but somehow it works. Everyone gets a room. Everyone gets breakfast. Everyone checks out eventually. So, as you stand there in the lobby, suitcase in hand, you realize something. The infinite hotel isn't really about hotels. It's about us. About how humans grapple with the biggest ideas, the ones too large to fit in our heads. We turn them into stories. We wrap them in humor. We make them cozy enough to handle. Infinity, in that sense, is not something to fear. It's something to play with, to explore, to laugh about. And so, as Hilbert hands you your receipt, you smile. You step outside into the bright light of morning. The buses are gone. The trains are quiet. The airplanes have flown off into the sky. The hotel stands behind you, endless and impossible, but strangely inviting. You take a deep breath. You realize that while your stay at Hilbert's hotel is over, infinity itself goes on, always waiting, always stretching, always ready for the next curious traveler who wants to check in. And maybe, when you're lying in bed tonight, drifting off to sleep, you'll picture it again. The endless hallway, the infinite doors, the quiet hum of infinity, patient and eternal. And just as your eyelids grow heavy, you still hear Hilbert Sip's calm voice, whispering like a lullaby. Don't sit worry. There's Sip's always room.